Hi everyone, my name is Yuriana Valdez Herrera, and today I will be talking about the selection criteria by format on podcasts. So, what are podcasts? Podcasts are talk radio series on demand. Listeners are able to tune in to talk shows almost at any time and anywhere, so it's easily accessible. Some of the advantages um, in utilizing the podcast are it gives students a different medium to experience. So if you're using this in the classroom or even in the library, I've had my experiences where it had been used in the library before. Other than actually reading selections and texts, podcasts are great for students to experience listening to something rather than reading it. So it activates their listening skills. A range of topics are available. So there are websites where you can actually access podcasts that vary in the types of topics. Sometimes you'll find some series of like mystery and fictional podcasts. Again, so it does not have to be all informative. And they are free or at a low cost. So I think that's one of my favorite advantages as far as podcasts, because they can be easily accessible to the educators and the students. Some of the disadvantages, though, are that sometimes you can have downloading issues, especially if the devices in which the podcasts are being accessed from do not support, depending on the website or source you're getting it from. May require a separate app for downloading. So this is where kind of like the downloading issues occur. Students may be able to access through their own device. So sometimes if there's like maybe direct subscriptions, or you cannot be able to access it as a full class through one device, that could be conflicting. Some podcasts may have scheduled episodes that interfere with timely access. So, for example, if you've got your classroom involved in a serious podcast, and they're really into it, sometimes those series episodes can be scheduled, especially if they are recent. So when you thought you could have them listen to a podcast every Monday, just depending on the agenda that the podcast is being issued on a specific day, that can cause some setbacks into your lessons or the use of. And then there's no systematic review for the content of the podcast. So unfortunately, I've have come across a certain podcast where there isn't a description or a review of what the contents are. If there's any disclaimers. So one does have to go through the podcast to its entirety to be able to determine whether it's appropriate or not. Selection criteria. Some of the things to keep in mind when selecting podcast are, is the content of interest to students and teachers? So do you think you would find it interesting and engaging for your students and as a teacher presenting it? Is the content available in a second language? Now that's something you do want to make sure that as far as selecting, if you have a dominant second language, is that something that maybe you can provide? If they are available. Is the content accurate? How do you know? How is this digital version updated? So do you know if it's if there are some updates being done digitally, and how can we determine that? Does the digital version provide links to other digital resources? And how easy is it to download the podcast? Implications for a collection development. So according to the text, the length of time one keeps print versions of podcasts depends on their use and the availability of storage facilities. So going back to the easy access of digital podcasts through download may be more beneficial and can save shelf space versus the actual printed podcast available. So just being able to determine those for your collection. And then the copyright consideration. So podcasts are accompanied by copyright policies via the website in which it is available. So just having to look through multiple websites and determining what their copyright policies are, and what you should consider when using a podcast. Generally, the copyright policies for the podcasts, they all have stated just being able to making sure that when you are giving credit to a podcast, it does not automatically make it okay to use it unless properly licensing. So just making sure that if it's a podcast you do have to buy, or in some way you have access to it under free or low cost conditions. And I would say most of the time, if it's free, and just because you're giving credit for it or giving credit to it doesn't make it automatically okay to use it. And then using a podcast for profit does not make it okay to utilize under any circumstances as well. So in other words, through the use of the podcast in exchange for being able to promote it does not make it okay, unless given proper and appropriate rights to be able to use it. But most podcasts are offered in the sense of being okay to be used in the classroom or in the educational setting. And here are my resources. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation on the selection criteria of podcasts.